Hey guys, thanks for watching as always. This is part 2 of the jerkbait making video. Now it's actually been a while since we made the first part of the video, but we ran into a couple of problems along the way, so that's why it's taken a while. Also, I've been working a lot. I've been working Mondays to Saturdays, doing a lot of hours, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to make some videos, but we got part 2 ready for you. So let's start at where we finished up last time, and that was with the body of the jerkbait. We've made the lip already, we balanced it all out. Unfortunately, we ran into one bit of a problem. The spray paint can actually exploded on me, and so the glitters went everywhere, including on the lure, so I've had to clean it up a little bit. Later turned out that it was completely pointless to clean it up because I ran into another problem, but you'll see that later. I tried this new spray paint right here. Sprayed the back and the belly, covered the belly up because the weight holes for the balance of the lures have been drilled in there, so I had to cover that up, and I wanted to give the back a nice color. On top of that, I wanted to create a couple of patterns, and I'm just using a permanent marker here to do so. Now, one thing you'll have to remember is that you'll have to either spray some more paint over the permanent marker or use a bit of urethane, do another urethane dip, otherwise it's going to run out when it reacts with the epoxy, but that's easy enough to do. Now here you see I've sprayed some more paint over the pattern, and we're ready to fix up the screw eyes. Now, since this lure is going overseas and will be used for barramundi fishing, we have to make sure that these screw eyes are fixed in very well. So I'm actually using some sawdust and super glue to fix in these screw eyes. On top of that, the belly hook hanger is actually drilled in an angle. The reason that we've actually drilled the screw eye in on an angle is that when there's pressure on the screw eye, because a fish has been hooked up, it's very hard to, well, it's practically impossible to pull out the screw eye because it won't pull out straight, it sits on an angle. So that's going to keep that screw eye in nice and fixed. Obviously, the sawdust and super glue will definitely fix it in. On top of that, once we've put a thick layer of epoxy over it, it will definitely hold it all together. As you can see, the screw eye goes in on an angle. It's really hard to turn it. It's a very tight fit with the super glue and the sawdust, which is what we want. So we need a pair of pliers. But for the rest, it works out. Now the rear screw eye is obviously sits straight into the body, so we can't really put it in an angle. However, that screw eye is very, very long and thick, and with the balance weight at the front, it actually counters the heavy-duty rear screw eye. I've strength tested this thing, and there's no way that it's going to get pulled out. So that's all safe and sound. Now obviously you don't want to forget to make sure that the screw eye sits straight. With any type of lure, you want everything to sit in line, sit straight, otherwise the lure is off balance, and especially with these smaller lures, it's a very easy thing to do. When you use heavy screw eyes, you only need a bit of a slight angle difference, and that can screw up the action and the balance of your lure. Now obviously same procedure goes for the rear screw eye, except for that this screw eye is a fair bit longer, a fair bit heavier. We make sure we fix it all in really well. We've also got a cup washer that we fit onto the rear screw eye. Reason for that is we want this to make sure that the tail seals off well, and if we pour the epoxy in, it actually holds the screw eye in place. It will actually catch some of the epoxy in there, which will prevent the screw eye from being able to spin under pressure. So we've taken enough precautions to make sure that the screw eyes don't come out. Now, here's where we ran into a bit of problems. We actually had a bit of a bad reaction with the new spray paint that I showed you before. We did not a urethane dip before we wanted to apply the epoxy, and that went completely pear-shaped. So unfortunately that kind of ruined the possibility for us to have a paint job with the scale pattern that we previously carved into the lure. But we kind of just decided to continue with what we had, sand it all off, and then start all over again. That's why it looks different now. But oh well, we'll just continue on. Still looks pretty good. Here we're just cutting out some fins. Obviously this is all optional. A lot of the paints or the carving is all optional anyway. Good lure is well balanced and swim straight. That determines how well it catches fish. But since this lure is sent to a friend of mine, we want to make sure that it looks alright at least. So yeah, this is just some simple foil tape. You can get that at any do-it-yourself store. We use this tape for a lot of different other lures as well. Sometimes we do scale pattern foil jobs. It's pretty easy stuff to work with. You want to make sure that you get the tape that doesn't have a super thick sticky layer on there, because otherwise it dents in too quickly, and yeah, it doesn't look great. But this stuff is pretty easy to work with. It's pretty cheap too. I think it's called shirt tape. I think I paid $3 for it, for a whole roll, so that's pretty neat. Now, just to show you what you can do with the fins, this is a pretty simple cutout of a fin. I folded the two pieces in half so that you can trace out two of the same fins, and then on top of that, just to create some fin rays, I use a pen that doesn't have any ink in it anymore, and then you can just draw lines so there's an indent where you scratch the fin rays. Obviously it looks pretty cool. It's a pretty simple thing to do. It doesn't cost a whole lot of time either, and it finishes off really well. But again, it's all optional. Also, if you haven't seen part 1 yet, make sure you do so. We show you in a very elaborate way how we make the body and how we balance it all out. So definitely can recommend that video. Just applying the finishing touches to the pectoral fins. Then we're ready for the other side. There you have it. Looks pretty cool. Just a nice finishing touch to the lure. Again, I think that it was less than a minute, so it's easy enough to do. We'll speed it up here since it's the same process. Alright, now we just want to clean up the gill lines, because there was still some remnants of the old paint job that had kind of messed up. We don't want another fiasco with a chemical reaction happening, so just got to take our time to clean up the gills there. Then we're ready to roll. Now, before we do the epoxy job, we do want to fix in the swimming lip, the diving lip. You can see in our previous videos that we've actually spent a little bit of time on this lip to design it the right way so that it swims properly, it dives properly to the depth that we want. And on top of that, we've created a little bit of a slit so that the toe point on the lure actually fits in the diving lip. We want that toe point to sit as close to the lip as possible for the right action. And on top of that, the lip actually holds the toe point in place so that it can't spin and it doesn't pull out, which is pretty neat. we'll strengthen the whole lip with epoxy as well, and obviously any small gaps that might be in the slit that accommodates the diving lip, we want to fill up with super glue. This is really cool super glue because it actually kind of reacts with the Lexane lip, so it kind of melts it and fuses it to the wood, which is perfect. Now I've left the lip a little bit rough. You might see some rough edges. That is for a last minute finish up. I'd rather leave a bit of a rough outlining so that we have enough diving lip to work with. If I would have finished it up right now and there would have been some points that I had to adjust, that would have been a lot more difficult, so we just sanded at the last point when we've epoxied everything. But that's looking pretty good. That's a pretty neat looking lure right there. So yeah, it's practically ready for the epoxy, and then it's ready for a final test. Awesome. Would have been better if it had the original scale carvings on it, but I guess you can't have everything, so. Just double checking if it all sits straight. That's looking good. Let's roll. Alright, so here it comes out of the epoxy. As you can see, that makes a world of difference in terms of the pop of the color. It clears it up a lot. Very nice and glossy finish. And we fitted the hooks on the lure as well. We've actually decided to use Decoy YW77s. These are some of my favorite trebles. They're super sharp, they're saltwater resistant, and they're very durable as well. Yeah, that's one hook that I'll be using a lot in the future. And this lure has also been balanced out with these hooks, so obviously we wanted to stick with them. Now, here's the pool test. And there's a couple of things that we have to take into consideration with the pool test. The moment where I tested this lure, it was actually freezing outside, super cold, and so that means that the water is a bit denser. That also means that your lure is more likely to float a little bit more than it usually does when the water is a little bit warmer. So that's one thing you take into consideration. On top of that, this is fresh water. This lure will mainly be used in salt water, which will make the lure float a little bit more, so that those 2 points might actually cancel each other out. One thing we do have to take into consideration, I'm not using a super heavy fluorocarbon leader here, which there's a good chance will be used in Australia. Barramundi have got massive chafing pads in their mouth, and they easily chafe through light leaders. Usually when I fish for Barramundi, I would refuse to use anything less than 80 pounds. But I guess with 60-pound fluorocarbon you can get away with. But yeah, that's something that you might have to take into consideration. So overall, this lure in the pool at the moment slowly floats up, as you may be able to see. And that, you know, might be perfect for the conditions that it will be used in. So it might have very similar action, very similar floating rate. Well, that was it, guys. Next video will be footage of being used in Australia. Hope you guys enjoyed. Cheers.